In a small coastal town nestled between rolling hills and the endless expanse of the ocean, there lived a man named Ethan Carter. The town was simple, almost forgotten by time, with cobbled streets, weathered cottages, and fishing boats bobbing gently in the harbor. It wasn't the kind of place you'd find on maps or hear about in stories, but it had its charm, a quiet rhythm that matched the ebb and flow of the tides. For Ethan, this town wasn't just home, it was everything. Ethan was an ordinary man, the kind who blended into crowds without drawing attention. He wasn't particularly tall or strong, nor did he have dreams of fame or fortune. What set him apart was his kindness. People in the town often said that if you were ever in trouble, Ethan would be the first to show up at your doorstep with a helping hand. Whether it was fixing a broken fence, lending tools to a neighbor, or simply listening when someone needed to talk, Ethan was always there. His warm smile and calm demeanor made him a favorite among the townsfolk, especially the children who loved hearing his tales of the sea during lazy afternoons. Ethan's life revolved around two things: his family and the ocean. Every morning he woke before dawn, kissed his wife Sarah goodbye, and headed out to the docks where his fishing boat, the Lily, waited patiently. Named after their 6-year-old daughter, the boat was more than just a means of livelihood. It was a symbol of the life Ethan cherished. Out on the water, with the salty breeze brushing against his face and the sun rising over the horizon, Ethan felt alive. Those hours spent casting nets and hauling in fish gave him peace, a momentary escape from the worries of everyday life. Sarah, his wife, was the heart of their little family. She was as vibrant as the wildflowers that grew along the cliffs, her laughter echoing through their modest home like music. Together they created a haven filled with love and warmth. Little Lily, their daughter, was the light of their lives. With her curly hair and boundless curiosity, she reminded Ethan of himself as a child, always eager to explore, always asking questions about the world. On weekends, the three of them would walk along the beach, collecting seashells and skipping stones across the waves. Life, for all its simplicity, was perfect, but perfection is fragile and sometimes it shatters without warning. It happened on a stormy evening in late autumn. The sky had been dark all day, heavy clouds pressing down on the town like a suffocating blanket. By evening, the wind howled fiercely, whipping the waves into a frenzy. Ethan, aware of the danger, decided to head back early. He radioed Sarah to let her know he was on his way, promising to bring fresh fish for dinner. Sarah, knowing how unpredictable the sea could be, urged him to be careful. "We'll wait for you," she said softly, her voice tinged with worry, as Ethan navigated the Lily. Through the churning waters, he couldn't shake the unease gnawing at him. The storm seemed angrier than usual, the waves crashing higher and harder with each passing minute. Just as he approached the harbor, a massive wave struck the boat, sending it spinning wildly. The force of the impact threw Ethan overboard, plunging him into the icy depths. Flailing desperately, he managed to grab onto a floating piece of debris and hold on until help arrived. But when rescuers finally pulled him ashore, soaked and shivering, the news waiting for him crushed whatever hope remained. Sarah and Lily hadn't made it. The same storm that had capsized Ethan's boat had swept away their car as they drove along the cliffside road. Witnesses reported seeing the vehicle skid off the edge, tumbling down into the raging sea below. Despite frantic search efforts, no trace of them was ever found. All that remained were memories, the echo of Sarah's laughter, the feel of Lily's tiny hand in his own, the scent of her hair as she hugged him goodnight. The loss hit Ethan like a tidal wave, drowning him in grief. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, yet the pain refused to fade. He stopped going out to sea, unable to bear the sight of the water that had taken everything from him. His once bright eyes grew dull, his smile vanished, and his voice became a whisper. Friends and neighbors tried to reach out, bringing food and offering words of comfort, but nothing could penetrate the wall of sorrow he had built around himself. Even the house, once filled with warmth and laughter, now felt cold and empty, every corner haunted by reminders of what he had lost. Ethan began spending most of his time alone, either sitting by the window staring at the horizon or wandering aimlessly along the shore. He avoided conversations, ignored phone calls, and withdrew completely from the community that had once been his lifeline. Some people whispered that he was losing his mind, while others believed he simply needed time to heal. But deep down, Ethan knew the truth. Part of him had died that night, and he wasn't sure if it would ever come back. Yet even in the darkest moments, life has a way of surprising us. One chilly winter evening, as snow fell silently over the sleeping town, fate knocked on Ethan's door. Unbeknownst to him, this unexpected visitor would set off a chain of events that would change not only his life, but the fate of the entire world. For now, though, Ethan remained trapped in his grief, unaware of the extraordinary journey that lay ahead. The snowstorm that swept through the coastal town was unusual for this time of year. Flakes drifted lazily from the sky, blanketing rooftops and streets in a soft, white layer. The world seemed quieter, as if nature itself had paused to catch its breath. Ethan Carter sat alone in his dimly lit living room, staring at the flickering flames in the fireplace. He hadn't bothered to decorate for the holidays. There was no point. Christmas lights felt meaningless without Sarah's laughter, or Lily's excitement to hang them up. The house was cold. Not just because the fire was dying, but because it carried the weight of memories too painful to bear. Ethan had spent most of the evening replaying old moments in his mind, trying to hold on to fragments of happiness that slipped further away with each passing day. But tonight something felt different. A faint sound broke the stillness, a knock at the door. It startled him, jolting him out of his thoughts. Nobody visited him anymore. Most people had given up on reaching out, assuming he wanted to be left alone. Even so, curiosity got the better of him, and he rose slowly from his chair, wincing as the floorboards creaked beneath his feet. When he opened the door, a gust of icy wind rushed inside, carrying with it the scent of fresh snow. Standing on the porch was an elderly woman wrapped tightly in a thick woolen shawl. Her face was lined with age, her hair silver and pulled back into a loose bun. Despite the biting cold, she didn't seem uncomfortable. Instead, her eyes sparkled, with a strange intensity, as though she carried a secret only she knew. Ethan recognized her vaguely. It was Mrs. Harper, a neighbor who lived a few miles away in a secluded cottage near the cliffs. She rarely interacted with anyone, preferring solitude over company. Seeing her here on his doorstep was unexpected. "Ethan," she said softly, her voice steady despite the wind. "I've brought you something." Without waiting for a response, she extended her hands, revealing a small wooden box cradled carefully within them. The box was intricately carved with swirling patterns that caught the light from the lantern hanging above the door. It looked ancient, almost otherworldly, and Ethan couldn't help but stare at it in bewilderment. "What is this?" he asked finally, his voice hoarse from disuse. Mrs. Harper didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stepped closer, placing the box gently into his hands. "Take it," she urged. "It's meant for you." Ethan frowned, unsure what to make of the situation. "Why me? What is it?" She shook her head slightly, her expression unreadable. "You'll understand when the time comes, trust me." Before Ethan could press her for more details, Mrs. Harper turned and began walking away, her figure disappearing quickly into the swirling snow. He called after her, but she didn't respond. Confused and slightly uneasy, Ethan closed the door and returned to the warmth of the fire. Setting the box down on the coffee table, he studied it closely. The carvings were mesmerizing, forming shapes that seemed to shift and change depending on how the light hit them. There was no latch or hinge visible, just smooth wood that appeared seamless. Curiosity eventually won over caution. After several minutes of examining it, Ethan discovered a tiny indentation on one side. Pressing it lightly caused the lid to pop open with a soft click. Inside lay an object unlike anything he'd ever seen, a smooth, crystal-like orb about the size of a large marble. It shimmered faintly, emitting a gentle glow that pulsed rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat. When Ethan reached out to touch it, the surface warmed instantly under his fingers. sending a tingling sensation coursing through his palm. For a moment, nothing happened. Then suddenly the room around him seemed to shift. The air grew heavier, charged with an energy that made the hairs on his arms stand on end. A low hum filled the space, resonating deep within his chest. Startled, Ethan dropped the orb onto the table, where it rolled briefly before coming to rest. The humming stopped and the glow dimmed, leaving the room eerily silent once again. Over the next few days, strange occurrences became commonplace. Lights in the house would flicker whenever Ethan held the orb, even when the power supply was stable. Objects moved slightly on their own as though nudged by an invisible hand. At night, his dreams took on a vivid quality they never had before. He found himself standing beneath unfamiliar skies, gazing up at stars that burned brighter than any he'd seen in reality. Alien landscapes stretched out before him, towering spires of glass-like material, oceans of liquid metal and creatures whose forms defied logic. These visions weren't random. They felt deliberate, as if someone or something was trying to communicate. One particular dream stood out among the rest. In it, Ethan stood on a vast battlefield littered with wreckage. Ships resembling colossal insects hovered overhead, firing beams of light that scorched the ground below. Amidst the chaos, a voice echoed in his mind, not in words but in emotions and images so powerful they brought tears to his eyes. Fear, desperation, and resolve intertwined, painting a picture of impending doom. Earth, his home, was in danger. Alien forces, driven by fear of extinction, planned to invade the planet, believing its resources could save their crumbling empire. Yet, amidst the despair, there was hope. Ancient machines buried deep within Earth's crust could defend humanity. But only if awakened. And the key to unlocking them? The orb. When Ethan woke, drenched in sweat and heart pounding, he wasn't sure whether the dream had been real or merely a product of his imagination. But one thing was certain. The orb had changed everything. Its presence was undeniable, its purpose unclear, but undeniably significant. For the first time since the tragedy, Ethan felt something stir within him. Not grief, but determination. Whatever this mysterious artifact was, it had chosen him for a reason. Whether he liked it or not, his quiet, broken life was about to take a turn into the extraordinary. As days passed, Ethan began to notice subtle changes in himself. The weight of his grief, though still present, felt less suffocating. Holding the orb gave him a sense of connection to something greater than himself, perhaps even to Sarah and Lily. He started spending less time staring blankly at walls and more time exploring the orb's properties. Each interaction revealed new insights, new clues about its origins and purpose. Sometimes it would project faint holographic images into the air, maps of constellations, diagrams of machinery, and symbols he couldn't decipher. Other times, it emitted soft melodies that resonated with a haunting beauty, filling the empty house with sound. Neighbors noticed the change in Ethan, though they didn't understand it. He ventured outside more often, taking long walks along the beach or hiking up the cliffs. His movements were slower now, deliberate, as if he were searching for something. Occasionally, he'd stop abruptly, pull the orb from his pocket, and examine it intently. People whispered among themselves, speculating about what had sparked this transformation. Some thought he'd finally accepted his loss. Others believed he might have lost his grip on reality altogether. But Ethan didn't care what anyone thought. For the first time in months, he felt alive. The orb had awakened something dormant within him, a spark of curiosity, a desire to uncover truths hidden beneath layers of sorrow. Little did he know, these truths would lead him far beyond the confines of his small coastal town and thrust him into a cosmic conflict that would test every ounce of courage he possessed. By the end of the week, Ethan realized he couldn't ignore the orb's call any longer. It wasn't just an object, it was a guide, leading him toward a destiny he couldn't yet comprehend. One evening, as he sat by the fire clutching the glowing orb, he made a decision. Whatever lay ahead, whether answers, danger, or salvation, he would face it head on. The tragedy that had shattered his world had also prepared him for this moment. Broken as he was, Ethan Carter was ready to step into the unknown. And with the orb as his companion, he knew he wouldn't be walking alone. The days that followed Ethan's decision to embrace the orb's mysterious call were anything but ordinary. Each morning, he woke up with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. The grief that had once consumed him was still there, lingering, like an old scar, but it no longer controlled him. Instead, it fueled his determination to uncover the truth behind the orb and its connection to Earth's fate. He began spending hours studying the strange symbols and maps projected by the glowing artifact, piecing together fragments of knowledge as if solving a puzzle. One chilly afternoon, while examining the orb on his cluttered kitchen table, Ethan noticed something new. The faint hum that usually accompanied its glow grew louder, almost like a whisper trying to break through static. Startled, he leaned closer, his heart pounding as the sound transformed into distinct tones, musical notes that seemed to form words. At first they were unintelligible, blending into a chaotic symphony, but then clarity emerged, not in spoken language but in images and emotions flooding his mind. Ethan saw visions of alien worlds bathed in hues of gold and crimson, their skies streaked with multiple suns. Towering cities made of crystalline structures floated above endless deserts while rivers of molten silver snaked through valleys. These weren't just random scenes, they told a story. The voices, gentle yet urgent, spoke of a civilization far older than humanity, one that had mastered technologies beyond comprehension. They spoke of a time when these beings had visited Earth, leaving behind remnants of their power buried deep within the planet's crust. These remnants, dormant for millennia, were keys to defending against cosmic threats. But the messages carried warnings too. The aliens who planned to invade Earth weren't conquerors driven by greed or malice. They were desperate survivors fleeing the collapse of their own empire. Their home star was dying, plunging their world into darkness and famine. Desperation had turned them into aggressors, willing to destroy Earth to save themselves. Yet, even as Ethan absorbed this information, the orb reassured him. Humanity wasn't defenseless. If awakened, the ancient machines could repel the invaders, not through violence but by creating barriers so powerful they would render Earth untouchable. The orb's instructions became clearer with each passing day. It showed Ethan coordinates, etched into the fabric of the Earth itself, locations marked by ancient symbols hidden in plain sight. Some were carved into rocks along cliff edges, others embedded in the foundations of forgotten ruins scattered across continents. To activate the defenses, Ethan would need to travel to these sites and unlock the machines using the orb. It sounded impossible, a task too vast for one man to undertake. But the orb insisted only someone with immense courage and a broken soul, willing to heal, could wield its power. Ethan's journey began at dawn, the orb tucked safely in a leather pouch slung over his shoulder. His first destination was a rocky outcrop near the cliffs where Mrs. Harper lived. According to the orb's projections, this site held the first fragment of the ancient machinery. As he climbed the jagged path, buffeted by biting winds, Ethan couldn't help but wonder why fate had chosen him. Was it because of his loss, his resilience, or simply because he was available? The questions swirled in his mind, but he pushed them aside, focusing instead on the task ahead. At the top of the cliff, he found what he was looking for, a circle of weathered stones arranged in a peculiar pattern. In the center stood a pedestal, cracked and covered in moss. Placing the orb atop it caused the ground to tremble slightly. A low rumble echoed through the air as sections of the earth split open, revealing intricate mechanisms beneath. Panels slid apart, gears turned, and lights flickered to life, bathing the area in a soft blue glow. The machine was awakening, but activating it wasn't easy. The orb demanded more than physical effort. It required emotional strength. Memories of Sarah and Lily flooded Ethan's mind, forcing him to confront the pain he'd tried so hard to bury. He saw their faces clearly, heard their laughter, felt the warmth of their presence. Tears streamed down his cheeks as he relived the moments leading up to their deaths. The storm, the sinking car, the helplessness that had haunted him ever since. The machine pulsed in response, feeding off his sorrow, converting it into energy. Only when Ethan accepted his grief, acknowledging it without letting it consume him, did the activation complete. The machine roared to life, sending a beam of light shooting skyward before settling into silence. Exhausted but triumphant, Ethan collapsed onto the cold ground, clutching the orb tightly. This was just the beginning. The orb's map revealed dozens of similar sites worldwide, each requiring the same process. Activating all of them would take weeks, possibly months, and the clock was ticking. Reports of strange phenomena were already spreading globally. Unexplained lights in the sky, electrical disruptions, and eerie sounds emanating from nowhere. People whispered about UFO sightings and government cover-ups, unaware of the true nature of the threat looming above. Traveling from site to site tested every ounce of Ethan's endurance. Each location brought new challenges, not just physical but mental and emotional. One site in the heart of a dense jungle forced him to navigate treacherous terrain while battling exhaustion and hunger. Another, buried beneath layers of ice, in the Arctic, nearly claimed his life when a sudden blizzard trapped him miles away from shelter. Through it all, the orb guided him, its glow steady and reassuring. Along the way, Ethan encountered people who, knowingly or unknowingly, aided his mission. A local guide in South America helped him decipher ancient carvings, while a scientist studying geothermal activity in Iceland provided crucial insights into the mechanics of the machines. Slowly, Ethan realized he wasn't entirely alone. Strangers, drawn by curiosity or coincidence, played small but vital roles in his quest, yet not everyone believed in his cause. Skeptics dismissed him as delusional, pointing to his unkempt appearance and obsession with the orb as proof of instability. Others feared the implications of his actions, warning him that tampering with unknown technology could unleash catastrophic consequences. Even Ethan himself doubted at times, questioning whether he was doing the right thing. What if the machines failed? What if the aliens retaliated with greater force? The weight of responsibility pressed heavily on his shoulders, threatening to crush him under its enormity. Despite the doubts and dangers, Ethan pressed on. With each activated site, the ancient network grew stronger. Invisible barriers began forming high above the atmosphere, shielding Earth from prying eyes. Satellites detected anomalies in space, distortions in gravitational fields and fluctuations in radiation levels, but scientists struggled to explain them. Meanwhile, Ethan continued his solitary pilgrimage, driven by a mix of hope and desperation. By the time he reached the final site, a remote island surrounded by turbulent waters, Ethan was a changed man. Physically, he was thinner, his face lined with fatigue. Emotionally, however, he felt lighter. The process of confronting his grief at every step had healed parts of him he thought were irreparably broken. He no longer saw Sarah and Lily as ghosts haunting his past. Instead, they became guiding stars, illuminating his path forward. Their memory gave him strength, reminding him why he had to keep going. As he placed the orb on the last pedestal, a surge of energy coursed through the ground, shaking the entire island. Lights erupted from the ocean, forming massive constructs that rose majestically into the sky. Towering shields encircled the planet, pulsating with an ethereal glow. Above them, colossal star destroyers materialized, one after another, their sleek forms cutting through the clouds like guardians descending from myth. These ships, remnants of the ancient civilization, now belonged to Earth, ready to defend it against any threat. Standing amidst the awe-inspiring spectacle, Ethan felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The tragedy that had shattered his world had also prepared him for this moment. Broken as he was, he had risen to become a hero, not for glory or recognition, but because it was the right thing to do. And though the battle was far from over, he knew humanity stood a fighting chance. With the orb now dull and lifeless in his hand, Ethan gazed out at the horizon, where the first signs of dawn painted the sky in shades of orange and pink. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to smile, not because he had saved the world, but because he had found peace within himself. Whatever lay ahead, he was ready to face it. The final preparations were complete. Earth's ancient defenses, long dormant beneath the surface, had been awakened by Ethan Carter's relentless determination. The towering shields that now encircled the planet shimmered faintly in the upper atmosphere, invisible to the naked eye but detectable through advanced instruments. Massive star destroyers hovered silently above continents and oceans, their sleek forms casting shadows over cities and forests alike. Humanity remained unaware of the imminent threat looming beyond the stars, or the extraordinary measures being taken to protect them. Ethan stood alone on the remote island where he had activated the last machine. The wind whipped around him, carrying the salty tang of the sea and the distant cries of seabirds. Despite the chaos brewing in space, the world below seemed eerily calm, almost oblivious to the storm about to break. Exhaustion weighed heavily on Ethan's shoulders, but his resolve burned brighter than ever. He knew the battle ahead would test not only his courage, but also the limits of the ancient technology he had revived. As night fell, Ethan returned to his small boat and set sail for the mainland. The orb, now lifeless and cold in his hands, was no longer guiding him. Its purpose had been fulfilled. It had led him to uncover Earth's hidden arsenal and awaken it. Yet, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that his role wasn't entirely finished. While the machines and star destroyers could defend the planet, someone still needed to coordinate their efforts. The aliens wouldn't retreat without a fight, and humanity's survival depended on ensuring the defense systems operated flawlessly. When Ethan reached the coastal town, he found it quieter than usual. News of strange occurrences had spread, globally. Reports of flickering lights in the sky, unexplained power outages, and eerie hums resonating through certain regions. People whispered nervously about alien invasions, though most dismissed such talk as conspiracy theories. Even so, an undercurrent of fear rippled through communities. Stores sold out of emergency supplies, and families huddled together, unsure what to expect next. Ethan walked among them unnoticed, his worn appearance blending seamlessly with the anxiety gripping the town. Determined to prepare for the coming conflict, Ethan sought refuge in an abandoned lighthouse perched atop a rocky cliff. From this vantage point, he could monitor both the skies and the ocean, watching for any sign of the invaders. Inside the lighthouse, he set up a makeshift command center using tools scavenged from nearby homes and fishing boats. A radio receiver allowed him to listen to global broadcasts, while maps pinned to the walls marked the locations of the activated machines and star destroyers. Though rudimentary, the setup gave Ethan a sense of control, a way to stay connected to the unfolding events. Days passed in tense anticipation. The sky remained clear, but Ethan knew better than to trust appearances. The orb's visions had shown him glimpses of the enemy fleet, massive ships resembling jagged shards of obsidian, bristling with weapons capable of annihilating entire cities. These vessels weren't just war machines, they were symbols of desperation. The alien civilization, pushed to the brink of extinction by their dying star, saw Earth as their salvation. They believed conquering the planet would grant them access to resources necessary for survival. But Ethan understood something they didn't. Humanity wasn't defenseless. Late one evening, as Ethan scanned the horizon with binoculars, the first signs of trouble appeared. Distant flashes lit up the night sky, followed by low rumbles that shook the ground. At first, people mistook the disturbances for thunderstorms or seismic activity. But when metallic shapes began descending through the clouds, there was no denying the truth. Alien ships had arrived. Panic erupted across the globe as cities plunged into chaos. Beams of energy streaked down from the invaders' vessels, striking buildings and infrastructure with devastating precision. Power grids failed. Communication networks collapsed and streets flooded with terrified crowds fleeing in every direction. Governments scrambled to respond, deploying military forces that proved woefully inadequate against the invaders' superior technology. Missiles exploded harmlessly against the alien ships' impenetrable hulls, leaving humanity feeling helpless and exposed. But then something extraordinary happened. High above the planet, the star destroyers stirred. Their engines roared to life, bathing the skies in radiant light. Towering constructs emerged from the Earth, glowing with energy as they synchronized with the orbital fleet. Together, they formed a unified defense network, creating barriers so powerful they deflected even the most intense attacks. The aliens, caught off guard by the sudden resistance, hesitated momentarily before launching a renewed assault. This time, however, the outcome was different. The Star Destroyers retaliated with weapons unlike anything humanity had ever seen. Bolts of plasma tore through the alien fleet, obliterating ships with terrifying efficiency. Gravity-based projectiles pulled enemy vessels apart, scattering debris across the void. Meanwhile, the planetary shields absorbed incoming fire, protecting cities and ecosystems from destruction. The battle unfolded in breathtaking fashion, a cosmic clash between two civilizations, one driven by desperation, the other by resilience. From his perch in the lighthouse, Ethan watched the spectacle unfold with a mixture of awe and dread. The sight of Earth's defenders rising to meet the challenge filled him with pride, yet the scale of the devastation left him shaken. Fires burned in the distance, smoke rising from bombed-out neighborhoods. Refugees streamed along highways, clutching whatever belongings they could carry. Despite the activation of the ancient machines, the cost of defending humanity was already staggering. As the hours dragged on, Ethan realized the battle wasn't confined to the skies. It was playing out within himself as well. Every explosion, every cry of despair reminded him of the losses he had endured. Sarah and Lily's faces haunted his thoughts, urging him to give up, to retreat into the safety of solitude. But the orb's lessons echoed louder. Grief wasn't meant to paralyze, it was meant to transform. By channeling his pain into action, Ethan had become more than just a grieving widower. He had become a guardian of hope. By dawn, the tide of the battle began to turn. The alien fleet, overwhelmed by the combined might of the Star Destroyers and planetary shields, attempted to regroup, but the defenders pressed their advantage relentlessly. Smaller fighter craft detached from the larger destroyers, swarming around the remaining enemy ships like bees attacking a predator. Each strike weakened the invaders further, until finally their formation broke apart entirely. In a desperate bid to escape, the surviving alien ships turned tail and fled toward the outer reaches of the solar system. The Star Destroyers pursued them, ensuring they wouldn't return. As the last traces of the invaders disappeared into the blackness of space, an eerie silence settled over Earth. The skies cleared, revealing a sunrise tinged with gold and crimson. For the first time in days, birds chirped in the trees, and waves lapped gently against the shore. Ethan stepped outside the lighthouse, breathing deeply as the fresh morning air filled his lungs. Around him, survivors emerged cautiously from hiding places, their faces etched with relief and disbelief. Slowly, the pieces of shattered lives began to come together again. Emergency services sprang into action, tending to the wounded and clearing debris. Communication networks restarted, allowing loved ones separated by the chaos to reconnect. Life, resilient as ever, started to rebuild itself. Yet, Ethan knew the victory came at a price. Entire communities had been devastated, families torn apart, dreams crushed under the weight of destruction. The scars would take years, perhaps generations, to heal. Still, amidst the rubble, seeds of hope had been planted. The knowledge that humanity wasn't alone, that ancient forces existed to protect them, offered comfort in the face of uncertainty. As Ethan gazed out at the horizon, he felt a profound sense of peace washing over him. The tragedy that had once defined him had transformed into purpose. Broken as he was, he had risen to meet the challenge, proving that even the most ordinary individuals could achieve extraordinary things when called upon. The orb, now silent and inert, rested in his pocket, a reminder of the journey he had undertaken and the strength he had discovered within himself. Though the immediate threat had passed, Ethan knew the universe held countless mysteries yet to be unraveled. Somewhere beyond the stars, new dangers and opportunities awaited. But for now, he allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection, standing tall beneath the vast, endless sky. Whatever lay ahead, He was ready to face it, not as a man burdened by loss, but as a hero forged by love and resilience. The aftermath of the battle left Earth in a state of stunned awe. For days, people gathered in streets and parks, pointing skyward at the colossal star destroyers that still lingered above the planet like silent sentinels. These ships, once hidden, relics of an ancient civilization, had revealed themselves as humanity's protectors. Their sleek forms shimmered faintly under the sunlight, casting long shadows over cities and oceans alike. Despite their intimidating size, they inspired a sense of security rather than fear. News outlets buzzed with speculation about how these machines had come to life, but no one could piece together the truth. To most, Ethan Carter remained an unknown figure, a quiet man who had walked among them without drawing attention. Ethan, however, wasn't focused on recognition or fame. He returned to his small coastal town, seeking solace in the familiar rhythms of the sea. The lighthouse where he'd spent countless hours monitoring the skies now stood empty, its makeshift command center dismantled. Yet, even as life began, returning to normal, Ethan couldn't fully escape the weight of what he had done. Every wave crashing against the shore reminded him of the storm that had taken Sarah and Lily. Every gust of wind carried echoes of the cosmic conflict he had witnessed. Though the invaders were gone, their presence lingered in his mind, a haunting reminder of how fragile existence truly was. Still, there were moments of clarity. As he walked along the beach one morning, collecting seashells just as he used to do with Lily, Ethan felt something shift inside him. The grief that had once consumed him was still present, but it no longer controlled him. Instead, it coexisted with gratitude, for the time he'd shared with his family, for the strength he'd discovered within himself, and for the second chance he'd been given. The orb, now dull and lifeless, sat on a shelf in his home, a symbol of both loss and redemption. It had guided him through unimaginable challenges, forcing him to confront his deepest fears and heal wounds he thought would never close. The townsfolk noticed changes in Ethan, too. Gone was the hollow-eyed man who had wandered aimlessly along the shore, burdened by sorrow. In his place stood someone different, someone quieter perhaps, but also stronger. Neighbors who had once whispered about his withdrawal now greeted him warmly, sensing that he was ready to reconnect. Children played near his house again, drawn by the sound of laughter that occasionally drifted through the windows. Slowly, Ethan began rebuilding, not just his own life, but a future full of hope for those around him. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Ethan found himself standing atop the same cliff where Mrs. Harper had first handed him the orb. The snowstorm that had brought her to his door seemed like a lifetime ago, yet the memory remained vivid. He wondered if she had known what lay ahead, if she had foreseen the journey the orb would take him on. Her cryptic words echoed in his mind. "You'll understand when the time comes." And now, finally, he did. As Ethan gazed out at the ocean, he noticed movement in the distance. A figure approached slowly, wrapped in a thick shawl despite the mild weather. It was Mrs. Harper. She looked older than before, her silver hair catching the fading light as she climbed the rocky path. When she reached Ethan, she didn't speak immediately. Instead, she stood beside him, sharing the view of the endless expanse before them. "You've done well," she said at last, her voice soft but firm. "Better than anyone could have hoped." Ethan turned to her, surprise etched across his face. "Did you know? About the orb, the machines, everything?" Mrs. Harper smiled faintly. "I knew enough to trust that you were the right person for this task. The rest was up to you, and the orb." "But why me?" Ethan asked, voicing the question that had haunted him since the beginning. Why choose someone broken, someone grieving? Her expression softened, and she placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Because sometimes it takes a broken soul to see the beauty and repair. You carried pain, yes, but you also carried love. That's what made you strong enough to wield the orb's power." Ethan lowered his gaze, digesting her words. Love. That single word encompassed everything he had fought for. the memories of Sarah and Lily, the resilience of humanity, the hope that tomorrow could be better than today. Without realizing it, he had channeled that love into every step of his journey, transforming despair into determination. "Will they return?" he asked after a moment, nodding toward the Star Destroyers hovering silently above. Mrs. Harper shook her head. "Not anytime soon. But the universe is vast and threats will always exist. What matters is that humanity has awakened to its potential, to defend itself, to unite, to dream beyond the stars." Ethan nodded slowly, understanding the deeper meaning behind her words. The battle may have ended, but the story was far from over. Humanity had taken its first steps into a larger world, and there was no turning back. In the weeks that followed, life in the coastal town gradually returned to its quiet rhythm. Fishermen cast their nets into the sea, children laughed on the beaches, and the tides continued their eternal dance. But subtle changes lingered beneath the surface. People spoke more openly about the mysteries of the universe, speculating about the origins of the Star Destroyers and the civilizations that had created them. Some formed groups dedicated to studying ancient ruins and deciphering symbols carved into rocks, hoping to uncover further secrets. Others simply marveled at the newfound sense of connection, to each other, and to something greater than themselves. For Ethan, the transformation was profound. He began volunteering at a local community center, teaching children about the wonders of science and astronomy. His stories captivated young minds, sparking curiosity about the stars and the possibilities they held. On weekends, he joined cleanup efforts along the coastline, helping restore areas damaged during the invasion. Each act of service brought him closer to the world he had fought so hard to protect. One day, while sorting through old belongings, in his attic, Ethan stumbled upon a dusty photo album. Flipping through its pages, he came across pictures of Sarah and Lily, smiling faces frozen in time. Tears welled up in his eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness anymore. They were tears of gratitude, of love renewed. He realized then that healing wasn't about forgetting. It was about finding ways to carry cherished memories forward, allowing them to shape the future rather than define the past. That night, Ethan climbed to the highest point in town, a hill overlooking the harbor. The Star Destroyers had begun, drifting away, their mission complete. One by one, they disappeared into the heavens, leaving behind only streaks of light that faded into the darkness. As Ethan watched, he felt a deep sense of peace wash over him. The tragedy that had shattered his world had ultimately led him to a place of purpose, a place where love transcended loss and hope triumphed over despair. Standing there under the vast, star-filled sky, Ethan whispered two simple words: "Thank you." Whether addressing Sarah and Lily, the orb, Mrs. Harper, or the universe itself, he wasn't sure. All he knew was that he was ready to move forward, carrying the lessons of his journey with him. And so, beneath the brilliance of the stars, Ethan Carter stepped into a new chapter of his life, not as a man defined by grief, but as a hero shaped by love and resilience. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he faced them with courage, knowing that even in the darkest moments, light could shine through.